Okay, we're live streamed now, so you can go ahead and start. I apologize for that.
No problem. Again, I will say welcome to everybody. I would like to, now I've gotten all confused. I would like to call the policy meeting to order. It is now 4:12 in the afternoon, and I would like to welcome everybody to our meeting, particularly our policy committee minutes members. Thank you so much for your taking the time out to meet with us. At this time, I would like to call on Chris Catalano to read us some minutes from our last meeting.
Okay. Our last meeting was Tuesday, April 21st, 2020 at 4 p.m. Evelyn Bullock called the meeting to order at 4:01 with committee members present. Dr. Catalano read the March 10th Policy Committee meeting minutes. Evelyn Bullock approved as read. The PLS policy updates from NCSBA were policies 1310-4002, 1600, 5040, 5050, and 7805. A motion was made by Bill Sharp and seconded by Dean Edwards to approve as presented. To rest for 30 days, the motion carried. Policy 2302, a motion was made by Bill Sharp and seconded by Dean Edwards to approve as presented to rest for 30 days, motion carried. Policy discussion, this item was for information only. Leon Farrow presented policy 4150 for information only. A recommendation was made to have 2 groups of 3 people do all student transfer appeals. There was some discussion of the recommendation. Dean Edwards left the meeting at 5:19. The policy committee chair, Evelyn Bullock, adjourns the meeting at 5:27 p.m.
Okay. Before we move from the minutes, Chris, I would like to ask for a matter of understanding in the future where you have the minutes were approved by Evelyn Bullock or however you got it. I'm not looking right at it right now, but would you show that the minutes were approved with no corrections or something to that effect, that the minutes were approved so it doesn't look like now here it's up there. Okay, never mind then.
Maybe I just didn't read it out loud.
Okay, the way you, yeah, this is what I'm talking about, where you have Evelyn Bullock approve the minutes as read. Well, I guess when I look at it again, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Go ahead, move on.
All right.
The next item on the agenda, no. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes will be approved as read. The next item on the agenda is policies, new policies. Chris?
Okay, we've got a new policy from the North Carolina School Board Association. This is, deleted. This is policy 7503, teleworking. In the attached memo that I sent to you all in the email, it had this policy listed on page 4. This is an optional new policy that the school board has put together for what we've been referring to as remote work. The policy is calling it teleworking. And it authorizes employees to work from home at another alternative work location in certain circumstances and under certain conditions. We have in section A, it just gives definitions of the alternative work location, employees who are eligible, a definition of teleworking, definition of a teleworker, and then a teleworking agreement. We've actually been operating with an agreement that was shared with us by Rod Malone, I believe, by the school board attorney, that we've had our employees sign. And this policy aligns with the agreement that we've been using since the COVID-19 pandemic began, and we had to go into more of a remote work setting. The section B specifies that this should be used during an emergency situation. Section C talks about temporary or episodic teleworking arrangements. So this would come into play if we had, for instance, an inclement weather event, like a snow or something, where staff could still access the internet, but the roads might not be okay to travel. So this policy would allow us to continue a work day in situations like that, if Dr. Ellis deemed it necessary. Section D gives the general conditions for teleworking, goes into pretty great detail actually about what the person who's teleworking should be doing and how they should be doing it. And then section E has an exemption for ADA accommodation. Are there any questions specific to the policy?
This is Dean.
Dean?
Hi there.
In D3, it talks about costs.
Okay. And could you restate your question? I think you cut out and we couldn't hear the question.
Dean, are you there? Dean,
Yes.
we can't hear you. Can you repeat your question? You cut out on us.
Okay, but that's going to happen. I'm in the lower part of the county. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, we'll find
Yes,
out.
we can hear you.
Okay. In D3, it talks about the costs. In a situation like this, is there any way that the employees, since they've been using it so much, their telework, that their telework can be reimbursed some?
I don't know how you get a figure together.
In that case, I think we're giving them our computers so that
Right.
we don't have.
We're
to
using
phone.
we're giving them a school computer.
Right.
That would possibly be a Wi-Fi or a hotspot. Is that what you're talking about? Maybe internet connection?
Yeah, do all of them have those Wi-Fis, those hotspots, or just the computers?
I don't think they all have that. I think we have access to some, which would be, that could be a way to, instead of calls, if we had Wi-Fi's, we could, they could actually check them out. That's how we used to do it.
Okay. And the only reason I ask is because, like you say, some have good reception up in the other parts of the district. But you get down here, some of my folks down here do not have the Wi-Fi's, and what Wi-Fi's they do have don't work. So they've really got to use their own direct internet. And of course that charges. So didn't know if there was a way of being reimbursed for what they use.
So,
What
so
is
the policy does,
pay for? Dean, what is it they don't have, when they have to use their own
They're
personal.
they're having to use their own internet connection to have any kind of decent service down here.
The policy does specify that all costs incurred by an employee to arrange an alternative work location and to telework are the employee's responsibility and will not be reimbursed unless otherwise required by law. So that is in there. I think that would speak to internet.
Speak to it.
They're gonna use the internet anyway at home. That's not an additional cost. But I think our software on the employee own computer.
I'm not sure as to how that would work. If you've got Wi-Fi, if you've got internet service, is there a special charge for some areas? I'm not clear on what you're asking, Dean.
Okay, and that's fine. That's why I'm kind of wondering, and I know not everybody gets the techie piece to this, but down here, that's great to have a Wi-Fi. That's wonderful. You can have that little box all you want, but the
Right.
cell service is terrible, so the Wi-Fi doesn't work. So people are having to use their own internet. The internet service down here still isn't impeccable, just because they're still using copper instead of things like fiber or microwave. And so the connection better than the school Wi-Fi, if the school Wi-Fi even works, period, down here. So it's the teachers and other folks direct internet connection that they're using to establish a decent connection, decent enough to work their Zoom meetings when they have them for their students, so they're not blanking out or just totally not having good connectivity whatsoever to hold their Zoom meetings as a responsible teacher should. And so when they do that, that's using their internet service that they're having to pay for. And it just seems that the D3 section, it just kind of cuts them a little bit. That's all.
Do the MiFi's work in those areas?
That's what I'm telling you. No, because the cell service is terrible down here.
So if we have a few of those MiFi's that you're referring to. I think with our new plan, with some of the monies we're getting, we're probably going to have to purchase more of those MiFi's based on what you're saying.
No, because the MiFi's don't work. And see what happens, unless you can find an internet service provider or cell service that has better service here to connect to a Wi-Fi, then it would work. Picture a Wi-Fi, your little black box there. You put it up in your pocket, you think you can go anywhere. But it's only as good as the cell service. When the cell service isn't there, the MiFi is great to have a box, but you got a brick in your hand is what you got. And so it's really no good unless you have good cell service. Well, down here at the southern end of the county and back towards Middlesex, the cell service is extremely spotty. Most of the cell service that you have for your MiFi's comes from Verizon. You take that over there by Southern Middle, you might as well use that as a anchor for your boat. So it's just not good. And so a lot of these folks are having to rely on their own internet to connect.
So can we do this then? Is this plausible that we table this policy until we can have the technology department check to see what will work for those people in areas like that, so we can make sure we're fair to all of our employees?
I think you got a great idea, Ms. Bullock.
Okay. So is there a motion that we table this policy for further investigation?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Bill?
No,
And I'll vote in favor of it. So that's 2-1. We will table the policy for further.
let's vote.
I can't hear you.
Can you understand me? Can you hear me okay?
I can't understand you, Bill.
All right.
What did you say?
I'm having issues going in now. I know what Dean is talking about. That's anywhere you go. It's all about a service provider. And we're not in the business of creating service providers for individuals. And I think that's what Dr. Catalina was talking about earlier. The overall responsibility. So I'll try to chat it out through a text or something. Or I'll try to log on another way so you can see what I'm saying. Did you hear that?
Not completely. I understand that this is a problem everywhere you go. I got that piece of it, but I didn't hear most of the rest of it.
I have problems myself at home. When I try to log on to the bandwidth is low. That's not a school system issue. It's not like a school system IT issue. That's an issue at your home that you have to resolve.
Well, do you not think it is wise of us to investigate to see if we've done everything that we can do to help these employees with their work?
Dr. Ellis, step in there for a second, please.
I'm sorry?
Dr. Ellis.
Dr. Ellis? Dr. Ellis?
Yes,
He's asking you a question.
I'm trying to rephrase it, because
I understand.
I don't know. There's some things in here, you're right, we can't control the internet service and that. That's my issue now. I think there's something going to be addressed, because I know what Dean's talking about, because I live over there and I can't get anything. So I'm hoping that that'll be solved, but for our policy in the school, that's something we can't control. All we can control is if they do have the internet, they get the computer, all the other computer equipment if we have a remote learning day.
And that's exactly what I'm saying. We control none of it. So I don't know why we're paying to have the IT folks investigate it when actually we don't control it. It's ISP stands for Internet Service Provider, which is the individual uses personal responsibility. It's like Ms. Bullock or anybody else on this network call. It's our responsibility. The school can't do anything about that. They can try to point there. If there's not ISPs available, then they can try to set up ISPs for those locations by creating hotspots. Am I not correct on that, Dr. Ellis?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
I understand what you are saying, Bill, but my thought process is technology changes so rapidly. If there is anything out there that we as lay people, because I don't profess to be a professional on technology issues. So if there's anything out there that we've not thought about before we recommend that the full board approve this policy, I think we owe it to ourselves and to our staff to investigate it. Now, if the investigation shows that things are still the same, then yeah, we have to go with the policy. But until I know for sure, I would feel better letting it be investigated first. And it could possibly be that something that is causing all this might be something that, because we are getting extra money for technology, that we might be able to invest in. I don't know. I would rather know the answer to those questions before I recommended this policy. That's just my thinking.
Again, and we can go with it, but I'm fine with it. But what I'm saying is, ISP is an individual. It has nothing to do with technology as far as from what we're dealing with, what the school system is dealing with. It's an internet service provider that we all have the responsibility to be in control within ourselves, not the school. Now, I think at this point we're sort of taxing the schools for responsibility that they should be doing something different. That's all I'm saying. But we can flow with it how you want to flow with it.
Yeah. Well, at this point, we have voted to table it. The majority did. So we will table this for our next meeting.
So if it's table, Ms. Brewer, what's the responsibility? Who's doing it?
What is what?
What's the responsibility? Who's given the task to do what assignment if this is table? What are you looking to bring to the next meeting?
I'm thinking that the person who could explain all this and give us good, correct information would be our technology experts. And to me, that would fall under the guidance of Tremaine McQueen and his people. Or maybe Dr. Ellis can talk to Tremaine and get the information. But I think that would be our next step according to the vote.
We can invite Tremaine to our next meeting.
That would be great.
Okay.
And it may very well be that there's absolutely nothing we can do, but at least we will know we've tried. So now the next policy, Chris.
Okay. The next policy, actually, we have a group of policies here. Oop, right back to the same one. These are North Carolina School Board Association revisions. So the first one we have is a Title I policy that I'm trying to pull up. This is policy 1320. 3560, Title I, Parent and Family Engagement. We have Sheila Wallace, I believe, on the line here, who can take us through, talk us through some of the changes in this policy. In your policy update memo from the North Carolina School Board Association, this is actually the first policy on page 1. It is a required change, and then there are updates and footnotes that are for information only. So Sheila, I'll let you kind of talk through a little bit about what this policy is and then what the changes were.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
There we go. Yep, we can.
Okay. There were very minor changes to this policy. It was more of wording and just the way that we would actually term some of the parent involvement to parent engagement, as well as focus on how we would make sure that we are including our parents into the knowledge of Title I and other federal program initiatives, getting feedback from them, also ensuring that we have met the teacher qualifications for the staff that are paid from federal program monies. We have a form that we complete that within, and we're making sure that the terms of the document or the policy in itself is in alliance with what the state says we need to have in place. Students' academic growth and achievement, Sorry, I'm outside, so you might hear my dog. Students' academic growth and achievement. School officials are to provide each parent of a student who has participated in Title I program information on the level of achievement and academic growth. This is done every year. The CNI team drafts a letter. And with that being said, it gives them an idea, the parents or the guardians, an idea of how the students perform. It's also listed within our report cards that are public knowledge. Parental rights and opportunity for involvement. At the beginning of each school year, it is the rights to ensure that all of our parents have access to the knowledge of what the state required assessments are, and making sure that students participate in those state assessments. I think that's about it. We were supposed to remove that line about the superintendent.
Right, because we do not have a regulation or procedure, an official regulation or procedure, we did remove that and just leave the policy as it stands. Any questions about this policy?
No. Move on to the,
Okay, Ms. Jarrett has got two policies for us today. The first one is permitted salary deductions, and this is on page 5, I think.
yes, it is. First one.
But this one's actually, yeah, on page 4, and then it goes over on to page 5. So I'll let Ms. Jarrett talk us through the changes here.
So these are also from the School Boards Association. And a lot of it, as you will go through, is a lot of wordsmithing and then some additional things that we need to add. It modifies, okay, the policy title was modified to be more reflective of the policy content. And then the policy applies to exempt employees, of course, that's in the title, who are subject to the salary basis requirements of FLSA. So as we go through, it clarifies the group of exempt employees to whom the policy applies, and the exempt employees who are subject to the salary basis requirements. And we'll go through each line. So you see a lot of wordsmithing, words, so that there's a continuous flow of the intent of this policy. I'm not sure how we want to go through because it's a lot of wordsmithing. Would it be better for me to read through it or not?
If they have any questions.
Yeah, could you go through maybe just the major chunks?
Right, okay. So, let's see. So basically, they want to put in the exceptions. So the policy is individuals will get paid their full salary for any work week in which the employee performs any work, with the exception of what's listed below. So the deductions from pay and added in as the following information applies only to the exempt employees subject to the FLSA salary requirement. The board will make partial or full day deductions from the pay of an exempt employee. Added in is if the employee accrues paid leave, the employee is absent for personal reasons or because of illness or injury, and the employee does not use accrued leave because of one of the following reasons. All of this is actually happening now, but we're just updating the policy. And those exceptions are permission for its use has not been sought or has been sought and denied. So the original language was revised. Accrued leave has been exhausted. The employee chooses to use leave without pay. So these are additional phrases that have revisions that clearly states what the previous information was included in the policy. In addition, the board may make taking out partial day or full day deductions from the pay of an exempt employee for the following circumstances. So there were 3 added and 1 removed. The first added was to offset amounts the employee received as jury fees, witness fees, or military pay. For unpaid disciplinary suspension of 1 or more full days imposed in good faith for infraction of workplace conduct rules. The other is to recoup advancement or overpayment of wages. As I noticed, we have to recoup advancement of overpayment of wages at F. When we revise this, that should be E. And then what they took out probably was F, original F, or E, for weeks in which an exempt employee takes unpaid leave under the Family and Medical Leave Act. So that's coming out. The other 3 are going in. And further down, there is additional information, words that are sort of transposed to make a clearer presentation of that phrase. Reports of improper deductions will be properly investigated. Properly was moved to the end of the sentence. And then reference to the North Carolina Public School Benefits Employment Policy Manual was added to this policy.
I have a question.
Ma'am.
I have a question. Going back up to the beginning of the policy,
Ma'am.
the first paragraph and the second paragraph, are they supposed to complete the sentence?
Yes, yes. Where you see, it starts the second sentence, a school employee who
Right.
is classified as an exempt employee subject to the salary basis requirement of FLSA, then drop down to the next paragraph, must receive.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I thought. Just want to be sure. Any more questions on that policy? All right, we can move on.
Okay, the next policy is another one from Ms. Jarrett. This is on the last page of your memo from the School Board Association. This one is payroll deductions.
Okay, so this policy revises introductory paragraph for clarity. It removes the extraneous language in items 8, 12, 13, and 14 is taking out that, or 14 and 15, adding a new provision to authorize deductions to recoup advancement or overpayment of wages. Hopefully we won't have a lot of that. Replaces personnel office with superintendent or designee in the last paragraph. And then for informational purposes only, no change in local policy is needed. I think the footnotes were not updated. There was nothing needed.
Okay. Are there questions on 7620?
Thank you.
All right, let's move on.
Okay. The next policy is testing and assessment program. So if we have Chad Thompson and Melissa Dancy Smith on the line, they can talk us through those changes. These are actually on the first page, page 1 of your memo, and include some strongly recommended and some optional updates. So Chad or Melissa?
So good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So good afternoon. So the policy that is, the section that is changing is in C under 4.5. This is the section that is strongly recommended. And basically this is stating that a report will be provided to of local standardized testing is provided to the board in even number years to help reduce the time spent in testing. And then also this will be prepared and submitted to the State Board of Education in compliance with state law as well. So this is the major change in this policy. Down below, you will see there are also some legal references that have changed and some updated hyperlinks within this policy as well. But the major change comes in C 4.5.
Are there questions? Okay. Move on to the next policy then.
Okay, this one again is one for Chad and Melissa to talk through school calendar and time for learning. This is, I want to say this, yeah, this is on the last page. This was a minor change that was made to the hyperlinks. Chad or Melissa, if you'd like to talk through those changes.
Yes, the only thing that is changing here is once again the hyperlinks and the legal references at the bottom. Those would be the changes within the calendar policy.
Are there questions? Are there questions on policy 3300? Okay.
All right, another one that is policy Chad and Melissa reviewed, students at risk of academic failure, 3405, and this is also on page 5 and includes some minor revisions.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Catalano shared this policy actually has some minor revisions, and most of them are embedded in the hyperlinks at the bottom. Chris, if you would scroll back up, I just want to make sure I cover everything. But these are all things that we currently have in place, which would be identifying students who are at risk of failure, and also ensuring that we have transition plans for our students who are matriculating from elementary schools to middle schools and between middle schools and high schools. So the hyperlink at the bottom actually gives a little bit more clarity on the policy, and those changes are minor.
Are there questions? Okay, next.
Okay, the next one is counseling programs, and this is again also at the bottom of page 5 in your memo, and it includes minor revisions. So Chad and Melissa, if you want to talk through this policy.
Or I'll take that one as well. If you scroll down a little bit, Chris, I think one piece that was added, and Mr. Farrow is doing a lot of work with that, and that is the addition of related threats to child safety and training our principals and counselors to ensure that there's a protocol in place for that. And everything else is listed at the bottom again in the references. Again, minor changes to the policy.
And that policy reference was a change that we made in our last policy committee meeting to the name of that policy. That child abuse policy used to be titled Child Abuse Reports and Investigations. Mr. Farrow, do you have anything to add?
No, ma'am. You all covered that piece.
All right, are there questions? If not, we can move.
Okay, the next policy has a few more significant changes to it. This is the graduation requirements policy. And Mr. Thompson, if you could talk us through those changes. These are on, in your policy memo, these are on page 2, policy 3460, graduation requirements.
So in the previous policy of 3460, it did state that it taught through ninth graders entering prior to 1415. As of now, that those students should have been graduated by now. So it's a recommendation that the policy eliminate references to students who enter ninth grade prior to 2014-15. Once again, because those students should have graduated by now. Also, this policy adds new graduation requirements based on ninth grade entry. Students entering ninth grade in 2021 will be subject to 2 new social studies courses. This is added into the charts on page 3 and 4. You will see those requirements are added into the charts for graduation requirement for ninth graders entering the first time on page 4 as of 2021. And then it also talks about on page 3, that chart are students who had entered before 2021. So they finish up their graduation requirements at that point. There's also updated notes to the graduation charts, which we just talked through, and hyperlinks at the bottom, at the end of this policy. And then also section B reflects the change in the state law, which will eliminate North Carolina final exams after this current school year. I think
Is there any questions?
Are we still doing the senior project?
No, ma'am, it's not a requirement right now.
Well, I know it's not a state requirement, but I thought districts could decide whether they wanted to do it or not.
We are not currently doing it, Ms. Bullock.
Okay, thank you.
Dean has a question.
Yes, sir.
If you go back to the rubric, if you will, that shows the different classes that are required for graduation, are any classes that are listed in there available to 7th graders wanting to take high school classes?
So world history is, yes, sir. And then you also have North Carolina Math 1. Occasionally we'll have a Math 2 for a very accelerated student. Also a Earth and Environmental Science would be one as well under the sciences.
And that'll still meet the requirements for graduation if they pass it?
Yes, sir. They get the credit for high school, but it does not factor into their high school GPA.
And why is that if they have done an excellent job?
Because that's the state requirements, that's state regulations and rules and policy. That they can take the high school credit. It counts as a credit, but it will not factor in their GPA.
Okay.
Are there other questions? Hearing none. Okay, Chris.
Okay, our next policy is, professional and staff development. And this one, Mr. Farrow, I think most of the changes in this are related to, some student services professional development. So if you want to take this one, and Chad and Melissa can chime in if they've got anything to add. This is on page 1 of your memo.
Yes, so in this particular board policy, the recommendation that has been made is that to add a training program on child sexual abuse and sex trafficking to the required topics for professional and staff development. Look there in Part A, professional staff development, you will see that those requirements have been placed there. And that very first paragraph there, we have made recommended changes, adding that the superintendent or designee, also added that, again, the superintendent or designee shall seek input from the school and district administrators. We crossed the employee when developing system-wide programs, and that the principal shall seek input from the school improvement or leadership team. We strike through school personnel there when planning professional staff development. The other changes was condensing the existing description or requirements related to professional and staff development. And if you go to the bottom, I'm looking at letter D. There's things that have been added there. There's another section that has been added that talks about sabbaticals, and
Yeah.
would be
Actually, if I could interrupt you, Mr. Farrow. So those things are, all of the things in section D and E are already in our current policy. They're showing up in red here because this was actually not the school board association policy that was merged with ours. So these are not additions. They're just, we're adding them from our existing policy, if that makes sense. But you can go ahead now and finish talking through.
Thank you, Dr. Catalano.
Yep.
And the last change was there, again, there was a cross-reference to the child abuse and related threats to child safety. And that simply is, if you all remember, a couple of months ago, board policy, we presented board policy talking about the requirements that all of our employees had to have a training at the beginning of this school year on child sex abuse and sex trafficking. It's a 2-hour training, I believe. And that training happens every other year. So it would happen during the 2021 school year. It would not happen during the 21-22 school year. And then we would pick up again on the 22-23 school year. So that's the language that is talking about, that all of our staff is required to have training on trafficking, child abuse, and what to do in such situations. I'm finished with this policy, Dr. Catalano.
Any questions about the professional and staff development policy changes?
All right, we can move on.
Okay. The next one is domicile or residence requirements, policy 4120. And Mr. Farrow, I'll let you talk through this one as well. This was in your policy memo on page 3. And these changes were strongly recommended.
So in this policy, it adds domicile and residence defined, and it talks about that definition there. If you're looking at letter A, where it says domicile and residence defined. And I'll let you read that. If we have any questions about that, we can talk about it. You can see there where it strikes through some previous policies that were in place or what it says here in this particular piece is that a person can certainly have more than one place that is their residence, but they can only have one place of domicile. And a lot of that plays into with our North Carolina High School Athletic Association rules and policies. But you may own 3 or 4 different properties in Nash County, but you can only choose one place where you are domiciled, where you live, that is your residence. That's where you sleep, eat, that sort of thing. And that also comes into play when we're looking at where our students attend schools, because often we've had people say, well, I have a property here and I have a property over in Rocky Mountain. I have a property over here and I want my child to go to school over here. Well, they can't go to school based on where they have properties, but they go to school based on where the parent is domiciled, their place where they live, the place they call home.
Dean has a question.
Yes, sir.
What do you do for the families who are have the children 50% of the time, and then the other spouse has the children 50% of the time, and it's 2 locations?
So those parents make a decision on where the child is to attend school. If they want the student to attend school where the father is domiciled, that can happen. Or if they agree to have the child attend school where the mother is domiciled, then that can happen. The parents just have to make the decision of where the child is going to attend school, as long as it's within where one of their domiciles is.
Right.
Mr. Farrell,
Yes, sir.
can I piggyback on, that's a great question, Dean. Can I piggyback on Dean's question, please?
Yes, sir.
So if the child has 2 domicile address and they use the first one to attend a high school on the northern end, then all of a sudden, in the middle of the year, they decide they want to relocate and transfer the domicile. Can they do that, or once they set that in at the beginning of the year, it's permanent?
No, if they, during the course of the school year, decide that they want to go and live with the other parent and use that as their domicile, they can. We don't have that happen a lot. We do have it happen sometimes. Most often it happens at the start of the school year, or there are times during the course of the school year if there are parents in there and they're having, some sort of legal battle about the custody. Sometimes it comes into play.
So there's no exception. That parent has the final authority, those parents, to move their kids as long as they're within that domicile residence?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question. So
Yes, ma'am.
are we saying then that if Johnny's mom and dad divorce and they have joint custody, and if mom lives in one district and dad lives in another, he stays at mom's house first semester and he stays at dad's house second semester, but he doesn't want to be changing schools every semester. So if he lists mom's address as his main, as his home address, as his domicile, then when he goes to stay with his dad the second semester, who lives in a different district, he can still go to the same school.
Yes, ma'am. They would just have to provide transportation.
I thought that's the way it was, but I didn't quite get that from the discussion. But okay. Are there other questions on policy 4120?
There's one more change
Mr.
Okay.
down in letter D, participation in JROTC by homeschool students. Mr. Thompson, do you want to talk about that real quick?
Yes, sir, I will. So in section D, it does address a new federal regulation, whereas homeschool students who reside within the assignment area of a school and maintains a JROTC unit shall be permitted membership in the JROTC unit. So this is basically saying that homeschool students can join JROTC units, and that would be regardless if they are otherwise qualified for membership but lack enrollment in the school. So they would be able to be a member of that JROTC unit at this time. And that's the new section under D, homeschool students participating in JROTC.
Question.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Thompson, would we get any ADM credit for that?
So that is a good question, something we need to look at, but I think under my understanding is that this is just out of the federal piece, that they're just allowing homeschool students to participate, not necessarily that they are a member in the school. So they would have to be a member in the school to get ADM. So I would say not, but I will definitely investigate that a little further.
But they are participating in the school activity.
Yes, sir. And remember, ADM is they have to be at least half to 50% to be considered an ADM. So if this was just one class, that would only be, that one class.
So they would be eligible to participate in whatever the junior or the JROTC would be doing.
That's correct. They would be eligible to be a part of that unit.
What about liability?
I would assume it would fall just just like other students, as far as if they're on our campus. I think that's something else we need to really look into, as far as what does this mean for liability purposes as well.
But they're participating.
Lindsay, could you offer some thoughts on liability for those students? I know it references a federal law.
Right, and I am not actually familiar with the federal law that governs the JROTC. I mean, I would assume, my thought is that it would be the same general liability policy that would cover, any student that's on campus or any person that's on campus. But I can look into the law, but I doubt that the law would have provisions regarding the insurance or, the general liability of the district for those students the homeschool students that are on campus.
Lindsay, can you get a clear understanding too of exactly what it means when it says without regard to domicile? If the
yes. So hold on. Let me. I just want to go back and see. Are you talking about? Okay, you're talking about still on the JROTC.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I am not entirely sure what the intent was there, but my reading is that I think they're making a distinction between domicile and residence. So if you go back to the top, the definition, makes this distinction between domicile and residence. So what they're saying is typically you have to be domiciled in a particular school area in order to attend that school. But what they are saying in section D is that we're going to use residence instead of domicile. So we're not going to worry about where they're quote domiciled. We're going to say, if they're a homeschool student and they reside within the assignment area of the school that has a JROTC program, they can participate in that program.
Question for you, Dan.
Yes.
So, Mr. Fred, that's an awesome question too. as I'm reading this, this is how I'm perceiving it. If I got a kid that I'm homeschooling and I live in this side of Rocky Mount, but I don't want my kid to go to the ROTC in that side of Rocky Mount. I want to go to another side of Nash schools, then I have the choice to do that. So if I wanted to go to Northern instead of Southern, I can do that, even though I'm on the southern end of the tier.
No, I mean, I think that you still would have to, the child would still have to reside in the district, in the assignment area of that school. So if we go back up to the definition of residence, I mean, residence is just a slightly broader definition, right? So for example, if the child, you know, has divorced parents and resides in 2 different homes, then, you know, you could say, and one of them is in Northern, one of them is in a different part of the district. We could say, all right, we'll have him go to the you know, just choose one parent. Now that you can do that, and they can do that for domicile too, in terms of where a student is actually going to attend school. But I think what they're doing here is they're just saying, we're going to broaden that requirement for the JROTC.
So you have to live within the residence or the domicile. One or two have to be applicable.
Right.
Us.
I'm sorry?
I said, we all have to either, where all our students have to either be domiciled or reside.
These aren't our students, Ms. Bullock.
I'm sorry?
These aren't our students. What we're talking about now, not our students.
But if he's going to attend our JROTC, the question, if this says a student who resides, not one who is domiciled. So to me, that makes the difference. I don't quite understand yet, and I thought, well, if we keep talking long enough, maybe it'll click, and it hasn't. I don't understand how a schooler can be domiciled and reside somewhere else. I don't understand how that works, but I'm trying to listen to see if it's clear, if it becomes clear.
So the other thing,
there is a note in the.
This is strongly recommended.
Right.
It's not saying that we have to make this change. I would say that maybe we need to tweak the language to somehow work closely to how we look at domicile, because this would be giving homeschool students really an advantage that our students who are domiciled,
Yes, absolutely,
attend
you're right.
JROTC programs.
So
On if they don't want to go into the Air Force, but they want to go into the Navy, we don't allow them to switch schools. They have to attend the school that they are.
And I would just jump in there. I think that those requirements regarding domicile for homeschool students, those are drawn directly from the federal law. The federal law itself allows homeschool students to participate in JROTC, and it does not require that they meet the kinds of standards regarding domicile immunization. And then I'm just taking some of this from the note that the School Board Association provided.
Yeah, so the School Board Association did include a note in the policy memo that says there are unresolved questions as to the effect of the statute on NC school admission standards, and as the law does not expressly require homeschool participants to meet domicile, immunization, and other state admission standards. I don't know if that clears it up, but they did note that in the memo.
And I would say, Well, I would also just add to that, I'm sorry, Chris, I would add to that I'm just looking at the language of the actual statute. The statute does say homeschool students residing in the area served by the school. So I think that piece of it, I don't know that, I mean, I think I agree it's a little bit unclear as to how some of the other
Right.
requirements are, some of the other, like the state standards would be required. But I think for the purposes of residency versus domicile, I would think that just to be careful, if you were going to include that language in your policy, or to include this in the policy, I think you need to say residence rather than domicile.
But the actual statute uses both.
No, the statute uses residence.
Down at the, right there, without regard to domicile. That's confusing, but it is the law. It's the statute. So we really don't have a whole lot to do
Right.
with it except accept it, because it is the statute. There are some questions, but we won't be able to clear them up because it's the statute.
That's my reading of the statute.
Yeah.
So to clear up my question, the start of my question, this all set, this whole thing. I got a kid that resides in City Rocky Mount, and domicile is in Northern Nash District. I can't send them out to Southern.
Correct.
I'm a homeschool.
Correct.
Okay.
I don't want to derail this part of the conversation, but I did want to flag something for the board, and not to belabor the residency and domicile piece of this, but I wanted to flag something with respect to the domicile for divorced parents. I know it's not part of the changes, but if we're done with this piece of the conversation, I just wanted to mention something very briefly.
Ears.
Okay, sorry. So if you go up to section B3, and this was a question that was raised a little bit earlier, what if you've got a student who has divorced or separated parents? And if you go to B3 subsection B, so basically it says if physical custody has not been determined or has been granted jointly to both parents, or if the custodial parent wishes the student to attend school in the non-custodial parent's system of residence, then the parents must jointly agree on which residence will be used to determine the student's domicile, and they have to submit this in writing to the superintendent. I've talked with another district about this language. And again, it's not a legal, it's something that the board, I think, should be aware of the effect of this particular language. So what can happen, I think, and let me give you the real life scenario. I think what could happen here is that, say you've got a student with two parents, one parent lives in the next door county, in Edgecombe County, and another parent lives in your district in Nash Rocky Mount. The parent who lives in Edgecombe County has sole physical and legal custody of the student, right? However, that parent who has sole physical and legal custody of the student wishes the student to attend school in Nash Rocky Mount. And under this policy, they can do that, right? They can agree with the non-custodial parent, and the custodial parent and the non-custodial parent can agree and say, all right, we want the student to attend in Nash Rocky Mount. I think the concern that I think could come up is that you would have a student attending in Nash Rocky Mount who has a parent, the only parent who is permitted to make legal decisions regarding the child lives in Edgecombe, like maybe doesn't live in the county. And so it could potentially, I think, cause some concerns about the parent's availability to make decisions regarding the student and talking with that parent. It's not something that is a requirement that you would necessarily want to change this language, but I think that the board should be aware that that is something that could happen under this particular language.
So Liz, I got a question regarding that statement you just made.
Yes, sir.
Edgecombe Nash. They
Yes.
decided to send a student to school in Nash County. Transportation responsibility. It's the responsibility of the parent then to make sure that the student gets back and forth to that school?
That's a really good question. That's an excellent question. And I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I mean, I would think if they're living in Edgecombe County, I mean, you guys can't send your buses out.
That's right.
To Edgecombe County. So, I would think that would have to be, the transportation is going to be an issue.
The bus would actually go to the residence that the parents are using as their domicile.
Yeah.
So it would go to Dad's house wherever he lives in Nash County.
But hold it, the domicile resident is in Edgecombe County.
Well, but the parents can agree. The parents can agree that for the purposes of domicile, the student's domicile is going to be in Nash Rockingham.
Okay.
But we have this scenario a lot.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yes, where there's one parent who has the physical custody of the child, but the parent, there's a father or a mother who lives in our school district, but the child has domiciled with the parent who has the physical custody, and those parents want the child to move with the parent who's currently living in our school district or domiciled in our district. And in those situations, what we do is that normally comes through my office. The parent has to provide that they're on the birth certificate. We get their driver's license. Sometimes we have them go through a educational affidavit and not on the birth certificate. And then we have the parents have a letter notarized saying that they are the parent of the child and that they're requesting that the child live with their parents. So there are various ways that we work through that. In the situation where the parent wanted the child to remain with them where they were domiciled in Edgecombe and come to Nash County where the father is domiciled or the mother is domiciled, then in those situations, we would have to get more information. We would have to talk it through. And we came to that agreement, the parent would be solely responsible for getting that child to school.
That makes sense.
It does. Are there other questions on this policy? 4120? Ms. Washington, you've not said anything. Do you have anything to contribute to the discussion?
No, ma'am, I'm reading and studying as we go along. I'll interject, Ms. Bullock.
All right.
Thanks.
All right, next policy then, if there are no questions.
Hey.
Is it 4230?
You go to the calendar invite and try it that way?
No, this is communicable diseases. Is that one next? Or go to whichever one you want to go to.
Use the one I just sent. Try that. Okay, yep. Dean Edwards got kicked out of the meeting. He's going to try rejoining us, so he'll be joining us in just a second.
Ooh.
Mr. Farrow.
Hold on just a minute.
Okay.
How long has Dean been away from the meeting?
I am not, it looks like 4 minutes. He sent me a text message I didn't see.
Because for us to have a quorum, we need to have him present, have 3 people at least present at all times. So the policy that we just discussed, 4120, we can't.
He was with us for the majority of that discussion, it looks like. And he's joining us right now. He can probably answer what he's missed.
We need to make sure, as an aside, and Lindsay help me out with this, but according to the rules, if somebody leaves the meeting, we need to know when they leave and when they come back to make it legal. And not only that, with just 3 of us, the point that he left, whatever we've talked about since then, is not really legal. Did I say that right, Lindsay?
Yeah, I think that's right. We just need to make sure that it's noted when he left and when he came back. And I think and maybe Dean can jump in, but I think to the extent that the board moved on from the previous policy, I think
with the
backing up and letting Dean offer any input before moving on. We need to redo that piece of it.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I'm back on now. Thanks to the southern end of the county. My bad.
That Wi-Fi we were talking about. Dean, when you sent me the text message at 5:22, is that when you got disconnected?
That's correct.
Okay, so it was 5:22, and Sarita will note that in the minutes. And it's 5:28 that he joined us back.
Correct.
I think it was probably around the time also that Lindsay went into her discussion offline, so that wasn't necessarily a part of the discussion we were having anyway.
Well, Dean, do you have any questions at all about policy 4120?
Was that the part where it was dealing about the JROTC?
No, that's the one on the domicile or residence requirements. Policy 4120.
Right. Yeah, I think that we were discussing the domicile piece about residencies and domicile and the definition differences.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can say to that is it just needs to be really clear what the definition of residence is as far as the definition goes at the top. Really clear what domicile is the definition at the top. And I would even go back to that first piece that Leon was going over before we got to the JROTC piece, because it went back and forth between residence and domicile. And I think that can get confusing to a lot of people really fast.
And I would just jump in there
We're on a different policy now. Who had a question? Somebody said
well,
that?
I was gonna, if it's all right, it's Lindsay. Just to clarify for Dean, the domicile residency definition, the language that I think the School Boards Association is using is, I believe it's taken straight from legal standards about domicile and residency. It's been a little while since I've read cases on these types of standards, but it's pretty standard. This language for these two types of concepts is pretty standard, and so I think they're just revising it to conform with what has been used in cases discussing domicile and residency.
Okay. Are there other questions? Comments? Can we scan back over this policy? I think we have talked, there are 2 different policies, and I'm looking over my sheet. The one that was discussing JROTC, I got it. I'm with it now.
It was all the same policy.
It's all getting me confused. I'm with it.
Okay, are we ready
to be right? Yes, ma'am. We're ready for the next one.
Okay, communicable diseases, students, policy 4230. This is on page 3 of the memo. I sent to you in the attachment and has several required and several strongly recommended adjustments. So Mr. Farrow, I'll let you talk through these.
Yes, so there, as you can see, the changes here are extensive. There are a lot of changes in this particular policy. The big piece, one of the big rocks, is that it's moving away from talking necessarily specifically about HIV and AIDS to really broadening the definition of communicable disease. You'll see there in the first paragraph, it strikes through, including HIV and AIDS, and it ends with and to control communicable diseases. If you look under definition, it defines what a communicable disease is. It's defined as an illness due to an infectious agent, usually a virus or bacteria, or its toxic product that is transmitted directly or indirectly to a person from an infected person or animal. And then it goes on to talk more about reporting, who do you report to, how is this reported out, following FERPA guidelines, HIPAA guidelines. So what I would like to do, because it's so much, is if we could just allow some time, Dr. Catalano, for our board members to look at it, and if there are particular pieces that they have questions about, then we can answer those specific pieces.
Are there questions that anybody has on this? We should have already read the policy, so I don't think we need time for them, for anybody to read it now. But does anybody have any questions? Or did everybody read the policy? Well, I don't hear a yes, so that means does that mean we didn't read it?
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now. Did you read the policy?
This is Dean. I read the policy. There was only one piece in there that kind of confused me. And I can't see it right now, obviously, but it would come at this time. But there's one piece in there where it talks about employees are not able to inform anybody but a health provider or a health person, a medical person, about finding out that a student has a communicable disease. But then about 2 paragraphs under that, it says that the employee must advise the principal. And I just wondering if there's any way of making that a little bit more clear.
How we are currently operating, Mr. Edwards, is if there is, for instance, in our current situation, before we got out of school, if a student went to a teacher and said, I've tested positive for COVID-19, then that teacher would be responsible for getting that information to the principal and the school nurse. That principal would not, that teacher, would not be required to share that information with anybody else within the school, just the principal or assistant principal and the school nurse. Those individuals as well would only be able really at that point to talk to the school nurse, the assistant principal, or the health department, because we do have a whole policy that talks about when we have these communicable diseases, and I believe it talks about in this particular policy as well, who we contact with the health department to make them aware of the situation. So I guess what I'm saying is that the principal or the assistant principal, because of their role in the school, would be considered someone who this information could go through to the school nurse or to the health department.
Dean, can I? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I'm good with that. I believe in organizational structure where the teacher ought to be able to speak first to the principal about something as sensitive as this, and then that's where it stops for that employee. No more bringing it up. But before I even got to that point, there was the section.
Dean, I think I've found the sections you're.
After two of.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
Okay, I wasn't
ahead,
sure.
Lindsay.
Yeah, I think I found. So I think, are you talking about? There's a section, paragraph D2B, which says that an employee who becomes aware of the communicable disease shall respect and maintain that student's right of privacy and the confidentiality of his or her records, and may not share that information in a manner that violates FERPA.
Well, that's one of them, but I think.
And then further, okay, I'm sorry. Continue.
No, we're good. I think we're just trying to find that one spot that I saw where it says that the employee first speaks with the medical folk.
Yeah.
Medical
and
or health.
And then later on
first.
It says, yeah. I don't see the place where they speak with the medical folks first. I see where it says that they address the needs of the student, that they're required to notify the principal. But I don't see the one that you're talking about where they're required to notify medical.
Okay. Well, as soon as the wind blows a little bit better and I can see a picture, I'll be able to.
It's at C. Move up just a little bit on page 2 of the policy. Is it C?
Yeah, so it does. It says C. In addition, if the student has a disease or condition that is required to be reported to the local health director, employees who are informed of or become aware of the student's status may not share that information with anyone, including other school personnel,
yeah, I see what you're talking
unless
about.
specifically permitted to do so by the health director.
Correct.
I see. Yep. Okay.
So what it seems there, or as it reads to me, is that if once we have shared this information with the health department and this has been deemed to be true, that employees who are aware of this situation or become aware of it cannot be sharing this information with other employees.
But I see what Dean is saying, though, is you could potentially read that to conflict with section 3 or section D3, which says that if they become aware of this, then they report it to the principal. I think I see what Dean is saying, is that you could construe other school personnel as the school principal.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I just feel that either it needs to be wordsmithed a little bit, or a really detailed training on it when this is provided to the employees.
Chris, can you go back up to D3?
So I think the difference is that is the employee reporting it, and the other one is privacy and confidentiality of affected persons. So it's really the number 3 talks about reporting it. You're going to report it to the principal and the school nurse, but then you're not going to, the way that I read it, number 2 says, but you're not sharing it universally. Like you're only notifying the people that need to be notified. Otherwise, you'll be violating FERPA.
And I think that's the intent, Chris, but I don't think the language is particularly clear on it. Because I think it could be read to say that you can't notify, they couldn't make this report under D3, they couldn't make this report to the principal. So you could potentially wordsmith to clarify. You could add like a clause that says, become aware of the student status, may not share that information with anyone, including other school personnel. You could put a parentheses, except for reports to the principal under section D3. So, something like that, a parenthetical would I think clarify that.
So do you all want us to take this back and to wordsmith it and let Lindsay look at it, or?
What would you like, Dean or Bill?
Yeah. This is Dean, and that would be my recommendation, just to be wordsmiths, just so it'd be cleared up a little bit more precise. That's all.
You want to make that an emotion that we table this?
I will make the motion that we table it to not correct it, but to wordsmith it to make it a little bit more clear. Thank you.
I second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded that we table policy number 4230 for wordsmithing. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Oppose aye, oppose no. Motion carried. So we will table 4230 for wordsmithing.
We have the sections that we need to look at, right?
I do, yep.
Okay. And that was section D3, and what was the other one?
It's actually D2 and D3.
D2, D3. Okay, got that in my notes. All right. We have one more, don't we?
One more, and actually, if we approve this one, then it'll actually be another one as well. So this is, and the policy number didn't show up here when I uploaded it. This is actually policy 7337. It's a new policy. It has not come from the North Carolina School Board Association, but Lindsay has been able to take a look at it, and this is the version that she has put together. And the only difference than from the one that I emailed to you is the cross-reference down here at the bottom of it, and within the language in the middle of the policy. So, Mr. Farrow, I'll let you talk through this policy, and then Lindsay can kind of chime in as well.
Is this one in conjunction with 7503 teleworking?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
What is it?
Are you pulling this up, Dr.? Okay. This was.
I am.
Okay. We've had several incidents in schools over this past school year where parents sent recording devices, audio recording devices to schools, and were recording what was happening in the classroom. And we didn't have anything in policy that really spoke to address that. All of what we had written in policy really just addressed the student. It didn't address the parents sending it with students. And so we reached out to Darrington and Smith and asked them if they could put something together for us where we could use to try to address that. And this was what came of that.
Are you ready for questions?
Yes, ma'am.
And this is just a grammatical correction. In the first sentence, the last phrase, or at school related.
I think I just fixed it. There was an A in there, and it shouldn't have been. Yep.
Okay. All right. Are there further questions on this policy? And did you say the policy number was 7370 or 7337?
7337, it actually references policy 7370 and 4318. They're cross-referenced in here.
Okay. Are there any questions about policy 7337? We've got one more.
We do, and this one is just, if we're going to approve 7337, this would add a reference to policy, excuse me, 7337 to policy 4318. And Lindsay, if you could kind of talk through that.
Sure, absolutely. So basically, the only policy that y'all had in place at the time when some of these situations were coming up was one of the policies that I think that was looked at to see, well, would this policy be something that would apply to these situations where students are bringing recording devices, and there wasn't really anything in this policy. This talks about wireless communication devices that students can have, but there wasn't really anything in there that addressed, well, what if a student has a cell phone and is recording without the knowledge of the teacher or the other students in the class? So we went ahead and we drafted a separate policy, but the language, we did want to add a cross-reference to the new policy. And so basically the language just says wireless communication devices, in other words, cell phones, may not be used for making audio recordings in limited circumstances outlined under policy 7337. And that's the policy that we just talked about, the new policy.
Are there questions about policy 4318?
Nope, but I'm glad you cleared that up, Lynn, because I'm thinking about with cell phones and technology, there's a lot of different venues popping up in the school. Hope you can control it.
And I would say just there aren't actually, I don't know of a lot of districts that have a policy on unauthorized taping or recording. I suspect that we get questions about them pretty often. And so I suspect that, there was at least one other district, and that we had worked with to come up with this. And so that's how we kind of modeled this one that we've presented to you. But I think that there will be more districts that are adopting policies like this, and it may be the school board eventually takes a look at it too. But it's surprising to me that more do not have this type of policy in place.
Okay, these new policies, we will send them on to the school board association, right?
Yes, ma'am. As soon as they've been approved by the full board, we'll send them and they'll upload them into our policy manual online.
Okay.
Well,
yes, ma'am.
On 7337, a note I had made was just that, is there any way to add something that gives us protection if it is used without or if a recording does happen that's in violation of this policy, Lindsay?
Well, I guess, I think, well, so I guess, are you talking about a student in particular? Or are we talking about I think we have to talk about whether we're thinking about employees that would do something in violation of this policy, or students in violation of this policy.
Students, any of these people on policy 7337, if they record without our consent, can we add something that says it can't be used against us, or a way to protect us if they do it without our consent?
Well, there's nothing that we can say in the policy that would necessarily prevent the parent from, doing something with a recording. I think you can take action. So if it's an employee, for example, you can use this policy this policy gives you the ammunition to reprimand the employee, right? If it's a student, this policy gives you the ammunition to go back to the parent and say, this is against board policies and you can't do this. anything that we would put in other than that to say, you know, if you were to use this, I mean, I guess if you're thinking in a court of law or in some other way, I think we could say that, but it wouldn't really have an impact necessarily. If that
Really?
makes sense.
So it wouldn't prohibit them from using it, even though it was a violation of policy, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
so wouldn't it also, now we're looking at First Amendment. That's what you're leading into, because once you start impeding if some, and I know we're on school property, it's a school, and I know what Mr. Farrell's getting to, but this is what LaShawna's, I think, leading up to. Now you're impeding on someone's First Amendment. So now you got possibly some type of legality regarding what I can. You're trying to monitor, control my speech.
I'm sorry. Did you? I think I misunderstood the question. Did you repeat it?
I guess what I was saying was this now sort of impedes on their First Amendment rights.
No, I don't think that's what I was getting at necessarily.
Not
I guess
you, but can this policy lead to that?
Oh, I see what you're saying. No.
Okay.
Well, then let me ask a question. To be clear, if something is going on in a classroom and a student records it and the teacher does not know that he's being recorded until he sees this recording on Facebook going viral. I think that is what you are alluding to, LaShonda, is it not?
Yes, ma'am. I just don't want, if they do it, I just wanted to know if we could put something in there to protect us. So you don't have our consent by way of policy. If you do it anyway, I don't want you to be able to use that against us in the court of law, should it get to that point. So that's what kind of where I was coming from.
Right.
I think the problem, I mean, and that's not a problem necessarily. One of the, One of the issues is that North Carolina, when it comes to wiretapping and the types of laws that would prohibit secretly recording somebody without their knowledge, there's really two kinds of laws. There's the two-party consent law, there's the one-party consent law. It depends on what kind of state you're in. North Carolina's law against wiretapping is one-party consent. So as long as one party to the conversation gives consent, then they haven't violated that statute.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of, I think that there would be, if, for example, there was some kind of legal action where there was the secret recording that was brought in, I think that there could be arguments that would be made by the board and the board's attorneys, regarding the admissibility of that particular recording. But I don't know that there's anything that we could put necessarily in the policy that would have that same kind of binding effect. It would be words, but I don't think it would really do much to actually, quote, protect you any more than what the policy already does.
I understand.
Are there any other questions? Are we finished now, Chris?
Yes, ma'am. Those are the last two.
All right, let me get my pages in order now. All right. We need a motion then to approve policy 1320, to recommend approval to policy 1320/3560, 1610/7800, 3410, 3460, 3620, 4120, 7560, 7620, 3300, 3405, 3610, 7337, and 4318. We need a motion to recommend approval to the full board that these be approved and lay on the table for 30 days.
I'll make that motion.
I'm sorry.
This is Dean, and I'll make that motion.
All right. Did you say, Bill, are you saying you second?
Yes.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend to the full board approval of the policies just named. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dean says aye.
Thank you, Dean. That is correct. Bill says aye.
Aye.
And Evelyn says aye, so it's unanimous. Thanks for the reminder, Dean. Is there anything else to claim our attention?
Can I just ask two things real quick, Ms. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I know I sent you a little message about this earlier, but can we look at developing a policy for secondary employment?
Oh, that's right. Chris, do we have a policy second people with second jobs?
No, so when you called, I think you called the other day, and my search of our current existing policies doesn't speak to employees with secondary employment other than dual employees within the district. So if an employee has is working at a school as a teacher assistant and is working as a bus driver, that is referenced, but not other employees or other situations where they're employed. Because, Dean, my understanding is what you're talking about is an employee who's employed with Nash Rocky Mount Public Schools as well as another, has employment somewhere else?
Yeah. Yes, that's what Dean said to me. Dean?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that correct?
Well, I mean, it's not just that, but it needs to be a little bit broader. There's situations that I've seen over the past 10 weeks that really needs to nail down to secondary employment, especially what time they can do their secondary employment.
So the teleworking policy does speak a little bit to that, and we've tabled it so we can come back to it. But if you look at that teleworking policy, it does mention work hours, and
Oh, yes, ma'am. I agree to that. And I just think there's some other things that probably need to be cleared up.
So when you're talking about secondary employment, what would you like the policy to say? Like,
Oh, we ain't got time for all that. Not on here. I mean, it's a policy. It's going to be, you figuring it's probably going to be 4 or 5 pages in length.
Okay, can we do this then? Number one, Dean, let me ask you this question.
Okay.
Are you talking about, let's talk first for conditions, for normal conditions. Are you talking about people who are working on a 4 o'clock, say from 8 to 4? And
that's just one of the examples. Yes, ma'am.
But in order for us to work this out, we need some start, and they could be working, Chris and staff could be working on some ground rules for secondary employment to bring back to us, and then we go forth with that.
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
right now we've not given them anything to even start on.
Well, correct. And that was the first thing was, one, I just wanted to check and make sure that there wasn't one. I searched and searched and searched before I called you. I tried to do my due diligence before I made contact with you. And then when I was at week 10, that's when I said, hey, there's somebody there with 22 years of experience. Let me just ask her. So that's what I did. And then I just provided just one mere example of reason I think there needs to be a secondary employment policy in there. And of course, we should take our time, draft up something. It would be a draft, let it be reviewed, and then come before the committee to be further reviewed, and then go to the full board for possible approval. So I'm just saying, yeah, I mean, I understand the logistics piece of it and the policy piece of it. I'm just making sure that we can get one started for the district and lead the district.
Can
So
I ask
do you?
this? I'm sorry. Can I ask this of
No,
you?
you go ahead.
Can you check with next slide to see if there is other districts who have such a policy, and if there are others out there who already have a policy, get copies of those policies so that we can look at those and then start developing our before do a whole lot of work. If it's already done and we can find something we actually like, we can incorporate that. If not, we can use that as a idea as to how we need to proceed. I think that might need to be the first step. Do you all agree?
Yes, I do, and I can send Nancy an email tomorrow and see if she can search the other district databases for one, and we can go from there.
Okay, let me mention one thing and then I'm finished. In regards to what Dean is talking about, I always thought at least there were some guidelines, if no policy. I heard someone talk one time about one of our employees working at another job, and the comment was made was that she was not supposed to be working there without permission. I thought that was more of a guideline, not a policy. I had never seen anything in writing about that. So you might could start looking for a guideline that would address that as well.
Ms. Bullock.
Yes, sir.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes, sir.
Is this the part of the meeting that we should be having this discussion, or there should be a closed discussion with bringing with Dean and you and maybe somebody else before you bring it to the committee? So what I'm looking for is, we've been in this meeting for 2 hours, and at 6 o'clock, I'm sure some people have some other things that need to get done. So, and as Dean said, this could go on for an extended period of time.
2 things. The first one is we didn't start at 6, so we are within the 2-hour period. However, I agree with you, and that's the point I'm trying to make, that we have Chris and staff do some investigation before we get together as a group to discuss and even finalize a recommendation for the board. You're right. I agree with you on that. And that was my point. And with that,
Chris? I can check with Danita as well and see if there are any internal policy or, procedures or anything like that that we have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and with that, is there anything else to claim our attention today?
No, ma'am.
If not, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you for your attention.
Have a great day. Be safe, folks.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Goodbye,
Bye.
Look.
Sure.